I'd say that to other female founders, is get yourself out there and build your network way before you need the money. Because then when you can call on people, they're there and you don't suddenly have to try and find those relationships.
Welcome to Scale Sessions, the podcast that helps revenue leaders like you boost sales and revenue to achieve business growth within the trenches insights.
We can skip the fluff and focus on real-world strategies you can use right away.
Each episode brings you actionable takeaways from sales and revenue leaders navigating growth challenges like you. Let's dive into today's session and scale up your success.
All right. So Heather, welcome today. We're super excited to have you on.
Likewise, thanks for having me.
Cool. So you co-founded Street Group with your brother, which is amazing, and you've had a remarkable success. How did it come about, founding with your brother?
I'd love to take the credit for the idea, but I am going to have to give that to Tom. Tom at the time was, he had a couple of his own businesses, and my dad, who is an estate agent, asked him to come into his business to see if he could help him sort of modernize his tech stack. So Tom ended up spending a bit of time in that business and became, I guess, acutely aware of how bad the tech that they were using was. And so in his evenings and spare time, he was a sort of self-taught software engineer. He started to code something to essentially automate what was a very manual marketing process in that business. He built something, very long story short. I went home that Christmas to my mum's house. Tom was there. He showed me what he built. And because we'd both grown up in that industry and that both of our parents were actually estate agents, when I saw it, I was just like, that is absolutely amazing. And this is going to fly. And at the time I was working for KPMG. So we just sort of concocted a plan over Christmas for me to quit my job, set up the business together. And the rest is history, really.
Yeah, I co-founded with my wife, which is a little bit different.
Did you?
So if you're anything like my kids, they fight, but maybe you're older and you're past that. But how do you find being brother and sister running a business? What's the dynamic like?
Do you know what? Really, really good. We literally never fight, actually. We've never fallen out over anything, which recently, when we took investment, was one of the things that we were actually looking for, because we tend to find that we agree on pretty much everything. And actually, we wanted some diversity of thought, some challenge, and having someone to say, actually, I disagree with you on that. Because I think we tend to agree on everything and our views on most things are aligned. So actually, the working relationship we have is absolutely brilliant. He focuses on the more engineering side of the business. I focus more on the commercial side of the business. So we have sort of different scopes and spheres of influence, and it works really nicely. He's got a skill set that I don't have. I have a skill set he doesn't have. So together, it works really well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I could not do that with my brother and sister. I love them very much, but the thought of working with them gives me the shivers. So given that your parents are both from the estate agent space, was there an entrepreneurial spark running through the business and through your family that you've grown up with?
Oh God, yeah, definitely. So mum and dad are both sort of serial entrepreneurs. So my mum was actually, they were both accountants, which is my background as well. But my mum, when she was about 24, decided, she was living in London at the time. She just walked into a bank. Things are so different now, but she walked into a bank, asked for a loan to set up an estate agency with zero experience in estate agency, got the loan, set up this estate agency with the premise that people had to value their own homes because she didn't have a clue. And it flew. So that was the first business that she set up, and she just did it on her own. And then eventually they accidentally had me and decided that they needed to move back to Manchester for family support. And somebody came in with a checkbook and said, how much do you want for this business? So she ended up selling that business, moved back to Manchester. Then she set up an interior design company with her sister, and then went back and set up an estate agency with my dad. So the whole family, mum, dad, auntie and uncle had historically had their own businesses. My granddad had his own business. So very much sort of in the blood, which I think has helped enormously with the track that me and Tom have ended up going down, because we saw it, lived and breathed it. So it was always a route that we wanted to go down. And that's what we've ended up doing.
So it was in the blood.
Definitely.
Sounds like your mum's been a big influence. Like, how do you think that, running a business isn't easy. There's always different things, different challenges. How was that her influence, helped your approach to running a business day to day?
I think it's massive, actually, in so many different ways. First, that whole saying, you have to see it to want to be it. I'm sure that's not exactly how it's said, but you know what I mean. That for me, setting up my own business and being able to do that and having the, I suppose, desire, bravery, ability to do it was always like, of course I can. It never crossed my mind that I couldn't do it because I had this role model of my mum and she did it. And she raised 3 kids, all whilst having her own businesses and did it successfully. And I think there's a lot of pressure, isn't there, on people to, particularly when you have children, do you continue to work? Do you stop? Do you have a break? You get all that guilt with it. But because my mum had done it, and I think she was back at work like 3 weeks after I was born, and I've got a great relationship with my mum, I think I had less guilt because I knew what my relationship with my mum was like and the childhood that we had with her working full time. And so I had that reassurance, actually, it's absolutely fine. You can do both and not have to compromise. And also she's very, very, if you have a risk scale, my mum is at one end of it, as in, I don't think she's the opposite of risk averse. She will just go for it. So when we were considering setting up the business, my mum, considering I was in quite a professional career at the time and, probably on a path to partner within a few years, and I was talking about quitting and, setting up this business with Tom, my mum was like, 100% you should do it. There's no doubt, absolutely go for it. Whereas I think, and that's her background, and to have a mum who was like, yeah, just go for it. Don't worry about it. It's huge because, there's a lot of other people in my life who are a bit like, what are you doing? Why would you quit your job now? You blah, blah, blah. But my mum was other end of the scale.
What's the best advice your mum's given you?
Oh God, best advice my mum's given me. Do you know what? I'm not going to say it's advice. It's more her attitude. It's a very go get it attitude. And I don't think she's ever actually said these words, but in her sort of ethos, it's that very few things in life are undoable, apart from having a child. But everything else, if you set up the business and it fails, KPMG will have you back, which they would have done. And they said that, actually, which they were brilliant. So her attitude is just do it, and see what happens. And I think that ethos has sort of rubbed off on both me and Tom in terms of what we do and how we've gone about things. But also I think we've learned a lot from her because I think she's probably too far one end of the scale and a little bit gung-ho, whereas me and Tom maybe seen the ups and downs, having lived with an entrepreneur who's had really good highs but really low lows. And maybe we've learned a little bit of, measured risk from living in that environment.
So you're more in the middle. I think we should get your mum on the podcast, Tom. What do you think? I think she'd be amazing.
So sounds like she'd be great. That's going to be your referral at the end anyway. To say, speak to my mum. But that when you talk about that with a business, it's so true. The first step is the absolute biggest because you're going, I'm going to try something. I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to make this work. And that's why 99% of people don't do it, because that first step is the largest one. Everything after that is smaller steps, right? But it just sounds like that step was not a thing that was in your mind. It was like, I can do it. I'll start. I'll try,
Yeah, I think for a long time I'd wanted to set up my own business, and I'd tried multiple times to set up a business as like a side hustle at KPMG, which when you're doing quite an intense job anyway, it's, in my opinion, quite unrealistic. So I tried various things, and then this was the first thing where I was like, no, I'm just going to do it, and there were tough conversations. Like, me and my husband had just bought a house in London, so we had this massive mortgage, and he's an accountant as well, so he was a bit, further towards one end of the scale on the risk. But again, he was supportive, and I was saying, well, just, spare room. And that was uncomfortable. We were reaching a point in life where we could have had our nice house, and I was saying, let's put it all at risk.
Throw it all up in the air.
Yeah. Which thankfully it worked out for us in the end.
What were some of the key takeaways from that experience that you're still using today?
For me, KPMG actually gave me a lot. Obviously, it gave me a very good financial training anyway, in terms of background and understanding things like working capital management, cash flow, all of that good stuff. I can definitely credit KPMG and ACA training to that. But the main thing I would say on that is the level of professionalism it brought to me and the standard of output. It was sort of ingrained in you at KPMG in terms of the high standards you had to have for everything, whether it's an email, whether it's the work that you present. And I think that's the main thing that's sort of shaped me in how I work now. And obviously the contacts as well, the people that you meet who, so many of them are now in corporate finance or PE, and having that network of people has been invaluable. Those are the biggest things I would say.
So moving on to the current business, you're modernising the world of estate agencies. They've obviously long relied on traditional methods and tools, as you highlighted earlier, that just aren't fit for purpose. But you're selling to a market where you're really trying to bring about change. And that's very scary for a lot of them. This is how we do things. This is how we've always done them. What if this doesn't work? How do you convince them that it's time to change and to change to you?
That's a really good question. I would say, actually, estate agents don't get enough credit for how entrepreneurial and innovative they actually are. I know how the reputation of estate agents traditionally, is, and I get that. And don't get me wrong, I think there are a few bad eggs in there. But on the whole, most of our clients are hardworking, entrepreneurial, genuinely trying to build a business that, they're competing with people often next door on this side and next door on this side. And it's a very cutthroat, very low margin business. So often they have to be innovative in order to survive. And so they are often looking for what can give me the edge, what is going to help me win more instructions, what's going to generate efficiencies. So for us, there was definitely a subsection of the market that was crying out already for what we built. They sort of knew that they needed it and were looking for somebody to come in and build it. So, on that traditional graph of the innovators and then the early adopters, I think we found it very easy to get the innovators and the early adopters because they knew what they didn't have. And I think it's fair to say in our industry, the tech that they're using to run their businesses is probably 5 to 10 years, or was 5 to 10 years behind other industries. And I think estate agents, a lot of them knew that. And so were crying out for the tech that we built. So then it was just a case of putting it in front of them, showing them, and the product spoke for itself. And then for the, for want of a better phrase, for the laggards, for them, I think it's where they see that they're losing market share to their competitors who are using products like ours. It sort of forces them to act because they can't continue with bad tech indefinitely and continue to lose market share. So they're sort of forced to wake up and see what else is out there.
So in that first bit where you say you got the early adopters, how did you do that? Like you said, you put it in front of them, but the go-to-market strategy to get to that first million of revenue, whatever, what worked for you?
So we've got two different products. We've got the product that we launched with, which is Spectre, which is a marketing tool. And then we've got the CRM. We call it CRM, but really it's estate agency software, which is called street.co.uk. With Spectre, we're going back 10 years now. We actually found that what worked for us best in the early days was literally physically writing a letter to estate agents. And that progressed from handwriting to printing out and manually signing it and stuffing envelopes to us buying an envelope stuffing machine. That was the progression of, and then obviously, it's a lot more sophisticated now. But direct mail to this day is one of our best marketing routes. And I think it's massively overlooked, particularly from tech companies, because you're like, oh, we're a tech company, we should be. But people like receiving physical mail. And if you can make that physical mail look good and, contain useful information, we have found that works.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, with Street, we took a different sort of approach, which was, again, hadn't been done in our industry, but we had built this software that was 10 times better than all the legacy software that agents are on. And we just took the approach that people need to see it. We need to get them to see this software. And so we just did tons of e-shots, direct mail, blah, 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 pushing people to sign up for the launch of Street, created a lot of buzz, got some PR. And then we had thousands of agents tune in to this launch of Street, where we just showcased everything we'd built because we were so confident in our product and how much better it was than what they would be using. And so that's what we did. And that gave us the traction and the momentum to go from there.
And you've also got a lot of credibility in that space, given your whole family come from that background. So they know that you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Just really interested, have you done a lot of direct mail testing, and has there been certain formats that you found have worked much better than others?
We always test it. Absolute fundamental principle is that if we're doing a direct mail, at the very least, it should be A/B tested. And then, once you've done your A/B test, you work out which got a better response rate, keep that one, test another one. We all have done that for 9 years. Hand signing always generates better with blue ink. I know it sounds really basic, and making sure that signature goes over the word so people know it is genuinely signed. And more recently, QR codes. So people obviously know how to use QR codes these days. So getting them to scan that and register details works. And it takes somebody from sort of offline, you don't know them, you've not got permission to email them, to online, and then you've got them and you can nurture them and you can get them to sign up to your webinars and get your product update emails and all that good stuff.
So over the journey of since launch, what have been the main objections you've faced and the real skepticism about what you're offering, and how have you handled that?
I think initially it was more of the idea. It was very, very niche what we were doing. So I think there was skepticism from mine and Tom's wider family and friends in terms of, can this really work? Is this really a business? But because we'd grown up in the industry, we knew it was. And then more recently on the street side, which is the more recent product, but it's massively growing at the moment, I think there's definitely been some skepticism from agents because we have certain things in there that help the consumer. So just to explain that a little bit, if you were selling your house or using an agent that was using street.co.uk, you as the consumer get the app. So you can see and manage your move and have that transparency and visibility through the app, which, to be honest, the process is crying out for. And I think initially some agents were like, do we want to give people that visibility? Is that not just going to cause more questions? And it's the opposite. Agents do a lot of work. They do a lot of stuff in the background that the average consumer has no idea about. And actually, if you let them know that you're calling out, sending match emails, and you're getting a viewing request, and you're, managing that move and all the data points that go into the valuation, all of that actually helps solidify you as an expert in what you're doing. And people want transparency now. They want to be able to, they don't want to answer the phone in the middle of the working day to accept a viewing request. They want to tap on the mobile to say, accept if you can do it. And I think we've had a bit of pushback in terms of, or a bit of a journey with agents recognizing that actually we do need to be mobile first in this industry. And that's the way the consumer is going. And if you keep relying on phone calls, over time, fewer and fewer people are going to be answering those phone calls. So you need to come up with something else. And that's it's just taking time and education on that, I think.
Do you find that you're actually getting consumers now demanding that estate agents use it?
Yes, we get that all the time. Yeah. So I know it's been one of the most exciting things actually, is if somebody's used a street agent before and they're moving into a different area, they will email us saying who's a street agent in our area or which agent is using street. We also advertised around the pitch at an England-Greece game saying that the best agents were on street.co.uk. And then we got loads of people on the website trying to find a street agent in their area. So if we didn't have an agent in that area using street, we got in contact with them and said, look, we don't have an agent in your area, but we have people that want to use an agent on street. So that's been fantastic for us.
Great route to market.
Yeah.
Such a great business. What you don't know what you don't know. So when you look back on that journey, what was the toughest thing? What was the hardest thing that's happened?
I think the COVID period actually was very, very hard. And then linked to that, actually, I think that forced a lot of the way we did things. I think one of the hardest things about scaling is there's a period of time when you grow where you're in contact with everybody all the time. So let's say up to 50 people, you're with them day in, day out. And this is pre-COVID, so it's face-to-face. So communication across the business is actually incredibly easy because you're seeing people every day. You're talking to them face-to-face every day. So you just know that everybody knows what's going on. All important stuff that they need to know to make decisions is there and easily accessible. And then COVID plus growth forces an issue where suddenly everybody's remote and we're growing, so you can't possibly be speaking to everybody every day anyway. And that makes communication and disseminating information across a business so much harder. And I'd say that was one of the biggest challenges, is changing. How do we make sure everybody's up to speed with everything and everything is being communicated in the right way? And we had to learn very quickly on that and change how we worked. So I'd say that's one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, people love to tell themselves a story when no one else is there about what's going on.
Exactly.
It's like, you know, post-COVID, we went from 50 to way more people. What did you and Tom actually do to make sure you didn't have those pitfalls on comms?
One of the things we did was revert to more written type of communication, which from our perspective is more inefficient, because if you're writing something out rather than saying it, takes longer. But actually, it gives you the opportunity to refine your message, distill it down, and make sure it's shared with everybody. We moved to an all hands format every Friday, where everybody in the company at 4:30 joins the all hands. We get updates from different parts of the business, and then we do anonymous questions to me and Tom as well. So anybody can submit any question anonymously and we will answer it in the all hands. And I found that that's actually been really good for making sure that we keep our transparent culture, holding me and Tom to account for the decisions that we make, but also giving people a forum where they don't know how to ask for certain things. And it has been useful. And to date, nobody's abused that. It's never become like awkward or, you know, uncomfortable questions. Everybody asks usually genuinely useful questions in that.
So given you've now got 170 people, how have you managed to maintain or build on your culture and made sure that you're hiring the right sort of people that want to live and breathe that?
Yes, we've been very deliberate about culture from a very early stage in the business. We both knew it was very important to us. And so we focused on it early on, which potentially too early in many respects, almost when we were too small. But we thought, actually, you know, the footsteps of today are the highways of tomorrow. If we get it wrong now, it's going to be difficult to change course. So we set out our operating principles. Me and Tom sat down and were like, what is important to us? And I think as you grow, the first thing to say actually on this is every company has a culture, whether you like it or not, you've got one. So you're either deliberate about it and therefore helping to shape it, or it's happening without you and you don't have control. And our view was, let's be deliberate about it and try and control what we can control. So we set out our operating principles in terms of who we are and how we work. And one of the key things we did there was link operating principles to salary reviews. Because one of my personal bugbears is where companies had values or operating principles, but they're literally on a wall and nobody cares. And I think that happens a lot. Like, to be fair, it happened at KPMG, like your screensaver, but does anybody really care about them? I'm not sure. Whereas with this, me and Tom wanted to make sure that it was important. So everybody's salary review at the end of the year, they get graded 1 to 5 against each of the operating principles. So if they want the maximum salary increase, they have to be honouring the operating principles. And they all obviously know that because it impacts them. And I think that has driven behaviour.
Yeah, living by your values is so important. What other advice would you give to like a female founder going through this kind of starting your own business investment journey?
I think from a female founder point of view, I feel it sometimes like a bit of a fraud, because obviously I've got Tom, so I'm not a solo female founder. And I do think it's harder to be a solo female founder. But actually some of the stuff that is conventionally a disadvantage, I have found to be a bit of an advantage. Like, I do think often I was underestimated because I was a female tech founder. And so I think we were able to get away with things and like grow so almost like under the radar without attracting attention from some of the big boys, in inverted commas, for quite a long time, which was great for us. We didn't want to attract attention in that way. So I actually quite liked being underestimated, and I didn't see it as a negative to me. But yeah, the other thing I'd say on female founders, particularly if you're going to look to raise, is, again, we didn't go through a conventional raise process because we were able to bootstrap for a very, very long time. We only raised for the first time last year. But one of the things that helped me enormously was my network. So that when we actually decided we want to raise, I already had the contacts. I'd attended female networking events. I was invited to like there was a PE company in Manchester that hosted like a female, I don't remember what it was, like a meal with a speaker. And I went and built my network way, way before I needed to raise. And I think that was actually very helpful. So I'd say that to other female founders is get yourself out there and build your network way before you need the money, because then when you can call on people, they're there and you don't suddenly have to try and find those relationships.
Heather, when you were going for this investment, did you find that you were treated differently to Tom?
No, I don't think I was, honestly. And I'm not saying that would be the case for everyone, by the way. I think it's because when we raised, at this point, we weren't knocking on the doors of VCs saying, here I am, can I pitch to you? We already had an established business that was doing very well. So they were knocking on the door of us. And that's a very different dynamic, isn't it? Because we'd already proved ourselves. I'd already proved myself. And what I know to be true, because I've got a lot of female friends in PE, VC, corporate finance, only 1.8% of VC money goes to female founders. So there is a problem. And so I'm saying my experience is different because we bootstrapped for such a long time, but there is no doubt a problem. And I think personally, having been through a different process, but the process nevertheless, it's a very male-dominated process, particularly when you get to the senior investment committee stage. I didn't come across a single female in any of that.
Yeah, in an IC
female
or something.
Female investors are twice as likely to invest in female-led businesses. So if I was a female founder starting from scratch, I'd be looking at which funds have female investors and female investors in senior positions, and I'd be prioritizing them.
Really good advice.
So next chapter, congratulations, you've become a mum recently.
Yes, yeah, 2 years ago.
Cool. Has that changed your perspective on life, business?
I think the only thing that's really changed is how precious I find my time now. I'm so much more deliberate about how I spend my time, because it's, I don't want to waste any time anymore. Before having a child, if I wanted to stay in the office until midnight, I'd just do it. It doesn't make a difference. It's not going to impact anyone other than my husband. But he'd go over it. So yeah, and so I just had that freedom with time. Whereas when you become a mum, I found that actually I just became so much more precious about it. But in a really good way, I think. Like before, I could, someone would put in an hour's meeting with me willy-nilly, and it could be absolutely useless with no agenda, and I would be like, yeah, fine, whatever. Whereas now, if somebody did that, I'd be like, where's the agenda? What we're getting out of it? Do we need an hour? And then my whole team know that, if they're putting some time in my diary, there has to be an agenda and it has to be useful time. So I think it's made me significantly more efficient as a leader. And I think now I'm just much more efficient. Do you know what else it's done? It's forced me to hire people as well, which has been such an enormous benefit. Because before I would stretch myself too thin trying to do everything and hold off hiring. Whereas we've recently hired a VP of sales who's been absolutely amazing. Should have done it a long time ago. Kicked off the process for hiring a VP of CS. And I think, again, it's because I realised that I only have a finite amount of time. But actually, there are people that are much better at doing that than I am anyway. So why didn't I do it earlier? And it's probably because I had the time to try and do it all. It's not the skills to do it all.
Yeah, hindsight's a great thing. You're always going to look back and go, I wish I did. When something works, you'll go, I wish I did that a year ago. It's just,
Mm-hmm. So, I think I'm a better founder now as a mum than I was before. And it's because I'm much more focused.
What do you think the tech world could do more of to really support female founders who are also parents?
I don't know about the tech world specifically, but I have some strong views on what society could do. Because I don't think it's a tech problem. I think one of the things that has allowed me to do it and do it well is my husband, how supportive he has been, but also how self-assured and confident he was in taking the shared parental leave. If he had been, oh God, I couldn't possibly be seen to be taking more than 2 weeks, or not confident saying, no, I need to do nursery pickup on X day and X day, my life would be 1,000 times more difficult. And I think there are a lot of men who are scared to take longer than the 2 weeks or whatever they get allocated of paternity leave. And I think that's hugely detrimental to any female founder who's trying to set up a business, but also to themselves. The stats prove that men that take longer build better relationship with their children, divorce rates are lower, and the child's development, mental and physical health is all improved. So why are we not pushing men to take more shared parental leave as a society? That's the biggest thing that's helped me, is that my husband has shouldered his, I'd say more than half sometimes, of his responsibilities as a parent.
They do that really well in the Nordics and in Germany.
Well,
We need to follow that example.
That's where a lot of the data comes from. And there's such a good example. It's really abnormal. I can't remember which company it is, maybe Sweden, for them not to take a minimum of 3 months.
Seen as a negative.
And that's how it should be. That's the biggest thing. And somebody said a quote a long time ago, I can't remember who it was, but said, the biggest career decision you can make is who you marry. And I would say, I just got very, very lucky in that my husband has, does everything he should do as a parent, plus more, and has supported me to carry on being a founder.
Yeah, you got to be a team. Yeah.
100%.
Be the team. Cool. We're going to finish with some quick fire questions to wrap up, Heather, like we normally do. What's the biggest lesson you've learned in your career? Biggest lesson is, it's such a cliche one, but it's got to be about hiring. Fundamentally, what is my business? It's people, and making good hiring decisions and getting the right people sets you on a trajectory that can go badly wrong when you get the wrong people. And also learning that when you've got the wrong people, you've got to get them out quickly. Don't just hope that things will change. And I think it's one of those things, you just have to live through it. You can read all the business books and all the culture books you want, but you have to live through the pain of a bad hire to understand the damage it can do.
What's one belief or perspective you've changed your mind about?
I would say it is trusting my gut. Bit of a controversial one, but I read a lot of books about, how to hire and how to make sure that there's no subconscious bias or unconscious bias or any sort of bias in the hiring process. And I think I've read it all, and I think I took it to the extreme. And if I got a gut feeling about someone, I would ignore it. And I actually think that led to some of the worst hires that we made. Whereas now, obviously, we still make sure that there's no unconscious bias in the interview process. But if I do get a gut feeling, I don't ignore it. I will probe and probe and probe. And if I still can't get rid of it, I won't make that hire. Which, is not the conventional wisdom that's passed on, because people say, oh, that's where, your subconscious bias comes from. But actually, you've led a whole lifetime of learning to pick up on subtle things about people.
You have to understand what people have gone through in their life. It's not always about what they've done in their job. And unfortunately, people don't always like being asked those questions in an interview, but then that often tells you if they're ready to work in a startup. Anyway, so yeah, there you go. A book or podcast that you love, that you recommend?
Biggest book that's had an influence on me is Radical Candor, which is a book by, I think she's called Kim Stott. And I think for me, I was definitely falling into the trap of finding it uncomfortable to give constructive feedback. And you read that book, and she's just brilliant in making you give constructive feedback properly and in the right way. And it's changed how I manage. And it's changed me so much that it's compulsory reading for anybody in a management position in Street Group. So I'd have to say that one.
Great suggestion. How do you switch off after a busy day?
I think I'm pretty good at separating work and home post-child, because, when I walk through the door and you've got this 2-year-old bundle of joy and energy running at you and super excited, everything else just gets forgotten. And, my focus is 100% him until he goes to bed, which is obviously not a massive window. So that's the best possible way for me, because I don't have a choice about it. And I'm pretty good with the, if I'm on holiday, I turn off my notifications. And don't get me wrong, I'm not checking my emails, I'm not checking my Slack, but I do it when I choose to do it rather than being interrupted by notifications. So I'm pretty good at separating the two. I'd say you don't really have a choice when you've got a 2-year-old.
Yeah, I think it should be mandatory to turn off notifications. You should go to those mediums when you want there's too much noise. Other than your mum, who should we interview next?
I'm going to say my mentor, a woman called Joanna Knight. She was Joanna Swash. She was the CEO of a company called Moneypenny, and she's mentored me for the last 5 years. Unbelievable woman, what she achieved with Moneypenny. She's now recently stepped down as CEO, but what she achieved with that business was phenomenal. And the lessons I've learned from her over the last few years have been invaluable. So I've got to say her.
Thank you so much, Heather.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Heather.
Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Me too.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in to Scale Sessions. If you found today's insights valuable, be sure to subscribe and leave a review.
Stay connected for more no-nonsense advice to help you scale your business, drive revenue, and achieve your growth goals.